Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Palmer Emmitt. He's a winemaker, and along with his partner Michael Scorsone, they head Emmit-Scorsone Wines. It's an artisan winery on the edge of Healdsburg, for those of you who know about the grape-growing regions in Northern California. Joining me in this conversation with Palmer is Peter Crosby, who introduced us. Pete and his wife Kathleen are very dear friends of mine who first brought us for a tasting, and Palmer immediately captivated us, describing the care, wisdom, and style he put in every bottle. And if it sounds strange to you that we went to a wine tasting that was hosted by the winemaker, well, you're right. You don't get that at the big commercial wineries, and he was even able to point right at the vines on the hill where the grapes grew for each blend. It's a really special experience, and he and Michael are both fantastic, and you're about to hear that. This conversation happened a few weeks ago, right before hillsides within a mile of him were ravaged by fire. Their operation survived, but this season's grapes may have been tainted by the smoke. We're going to find out in a follow-up episode, so keep your eyes and ears out for it. Now, as we always do, we want to ask you to consider supporting our favorite charity, Save the Brave. You can read about them at savethebrave.org, and you can support them, as we do, with some money or some of your time. This episode is brought to you by Dynasec Protection, offering discreet protection services for the most discerning executives either at home or on the office campus. Clients include the most successful tech and investment firms and estates from Silicon Valley to Napa and Sonoma Valley, and you can reach out to them at dynasecprotection.com. That's DYNASEC protection.com, or you can send me an email and we'll get you a complimentary assessment of your security risks and needs. You can get me at John at breakitdownshow.com. You can also get Pete at breakitdownshow.com. And hey, we'll hook you up with whatever you need. We'd love to hear from you. Here's today's guest, winemaker, tastemaker, adventurer, Palmer Emmitt.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland. This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Palmer Emmitt from Emmit-Scorsone Wines, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, indeed. Is this Healdsburg?
This is Healdsburg, yes. Dry Creek Valley.
Dry Creek Valley. Now, for our listeners who are elsewhere, I just want to say if there's anything that you find charming about Northern California, all of the things on the list that you find charming, they're all here. So if you don't know about this place.
We're on a patio overlooking a vineyard next to a barn.
That's right. That's right. A barn where magic happens, by the way.
So, yeah.
So
that's pretty idyllic.
Yeah. And Palmer is here because he makes wine.
Yes, I do.
How'd you get here?
How far back do you want me to go?
Well, let's go back to maybe the first time you tasted wine.
I can't recall the first time, but definitely the first time that it kind of clicked for me that wine was something that I appreciated was tasting wines with my father.
Okay.
He had a really nice cellar growing up that was something that was new. Wine was something to be revered. We had this beautiful cellar that you got to through a trap door in our dining room in our home. And
this says a lot.
I didn't have a cellar.
He was not necessarily
or a trap door.
Yeah, right. He was not necessarily a wine expert, but knew what he liked and collected wine, I think, partially because he enjoyed it, partially as an investment. He was a Wall Street guy. Napa Cabernets first started to get some traction and become as revered as some of the wines in France. And so he collected both first growth Bordeaux
were you?
And Napa Valley.
We have to ask, where were you at the time?
I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay. So we're talking about a Wall Street guy raising a family in New Jersey, but he knows about Napa wine. So you had an exposure pretty young.
Yep.
To an environment that here we take for granted. So please continue.
Yeah, and then we would take trips every year in the spring. We'd do a ski trip with my dad and myself and a bunch of his buddies, and there would be some pretty rowdy dinners with those guys, and there'd always be a bunch of wine going around the table. And when I turned 21, I got to share
Partake
in the
ritual.
wine.
Yeah.
Not until you were 21.
Right.
Right on that day.
Yeah.
Never
maybe
before.
a day or two before. The first wine that really kind of clicked for me was an Oregon Pinot Noir. Just kind of that, people talk about their aha moment in wine, and mine was an Oregon Pinot. So from then on, every time I was out with my father, he would let me choose a wine off the list. Usually choose a Pinot, sometimes from Oregon. He started to try to teach me what little he knew about wine, that the ancestral home of Pinot Noir was Burgundy in France. So we started ordering some red Burgundies, some Pinot Noirs from this area of California, Sonoma County. And I just kind of learned by tasting with my father and drinking with him. And I'd order the Pinot, he'd order something that he liked, a Cab or a Bordeaux, and we'd talk about it and trade notes. And that's where I first started kind of gaining that appreciation for wine.
Okay. Where'd you get your education?
So the next kind of step in my wine appreciation, I was living in Southern California. I moved to LA.
Yeah. Never mind your wine education for a moment.
Yeah.
Where'd you get your education?
I'm what you might call overeducated and underskilled.
We'll be the judge of that.
Yeah. Did my undergrad at Bowdoin College in Maine. Liberal arts college, but I majored in mathematics, but I took quite a few other interesting courses. I took a lot of film studies classes, which led me to apply to NYU for grad school. I got a Master of Arts at Tisch School of the Arts in Cinema Studies.
All right.
Worked in the movie business for about a decade, and during
What'd
that
you do?
time, fell in love with wine and eventually made my way here.
The movie business is a good place to be familiar with wine because there are a lot of wine appreciators there are a lot of wine appreciators in artistic environments, but certainly in the movie business, if you're in the profitable part of the movie business, people can afford to drink good wine. So when let's talk about your experience working in Hollywood for a decade. First of all, what'd you work on? What did you do?
So I started out doing freelance production work, whatever jobs I could
Whatever
get.
production work was there.
I worked on some small independent films. I worked on a television pilot that did not get picked up. I worked on a straight-to-home video movie called MVP2, Most Vertical Primate, by the makers of Air Bud, about a chimpanzee that plays ice hockey
Terrific.
and skateboards.
This is great.
I worked on a little movie called Cellular, which was kind of this B action thriller with Jason Statham played the villain, and Kim Basinger played the damsel in distress, and Chris Evans was the hero. There were a couple of great character actors in it, Bill Macy and Noah Emmerich, and Jessica Biel was in it.
Oh man, I love this cast.
Yeah.
How did this movie?
Now I have to look for
Yeah,
that.
where did this movie go wrong?
So it's funny. I had this buddy of mine that I worked with in the film business that I really respected his opinion. Really smart guy named Cooper Samuelson. He sent out this list to all of his friends in the movie business of his top 10 movies of 2002, and Cellular was on his list. And I remember to this day the exact wording, his description of the movie. He said, "This is the best pure B movie ever made. If you found this in a vault and were told that Hitchcock had made it, you'd say it was better than North by Northwest."
That's an amazing review.
Wow.
That's terrific.
And it's a B action thriller written by this guy, Larry Cohen, who's kind of famous for writing these concept thrillers. He also wrote Phone Booth.
I love the concept thriller.
Yeah. The idea of this one being that Kim Basinger is kidnapped, trapped in an attic. She's a high school science teacher. So when Jason Statham smashes the telephone in there so that she can't call out to get help, she's able to piece the phone back together piece by piece, but can't assemble the dial. So she can get a dial tone and just kind of tap out electronic signals.
Okay.
And she gets randomly, she doesn't know what phone number she's getting, but she reaches this surfer dude on his cell phone.
It's Chris Evans.
And it's Chris Evans.
Awesome. Awesome.
Hello?
Yeah.
What? You're talking crazy.
I didn't hear that.
And then after that,
we should disclose, I've made a couple terrible movies that never went anywhere. I might have been an action star in Thailand for about 6 months, and Pete went to film school.
right on.
So we're not strangers to the industry. We didn't get as far as you did.
And then after that, I worked on the only other movie I worked on you might have heard of was called, I'm blanking on the name because it had a different title when I was working on it. It was called the Untitled Ted Griffin Project. And then it was kind of the unofficial sequel to The Graduate. Kevin Costner and Jennifer Aniston. Kevin Costner plays the kind of continuation of the Dustin Hoffman role. Shirley MacLaine plays Mrs. Robinson.
Wow.
Wow.
And the premise of that movie is that Kevin Costner now 25 years later, is dating.
Has a May December romance the other direction.
The other direction. So he's now hooked up with 3 women in the same family, 3 different generations.
Wow, nice work if you can get it.
Yeah.
That's like
Rumor Has It. Rumor Has It was the name of the film.
Rumor has it. The only, when you think about somebody with a relationship with in the family 3 generations, I immediately think Motley Crue. That's just where my mind goes. Like, who gets away with that? Oh yeah, probably Tommy Lee got away with that. Anyway, so you work a decade in the movie business.
Yeah, and sorry, just to finish my kind of bleak resume in the movie business. After that was the last of my kind of freelance production jobs, and then I landed at Disney working for a feature film producer who had a first look deal there, named Joe Farrell, who was a former market research executive, and I worked there as one of his junior creative executives for 5 years before I left the business.
Wow.
So
something notable about that, though, is that you can have a decade of making a living in the movie business, and you worked on a movie that we heard of, sort of, and a couple other projects that were probably a lot of fun, but you can have a decade worth of a movie, business career and never, run into a fastball over the plate.
And I worked for this producer at Disney for 5 years, and we made 0 movies during that time.
Wow.
I
what did you do? What did you do at
so
Disney
much
for
work
5
not
years?
making movies?
Yeah, so I try to explain my job to people this way is that, I would have to read 10 scripts to find one that I liked. I would have to find 10 that I liked to find one that my bosses liked.
Yeah.
They'd have to find 10 that they liked to find one that the studio would buy. And the studio would buy 10 scripts for every movie they made. So that would mean I'd have to read 10,000 scripts to get a single movie made.
Perfect. That is a perfect description.
Wow. And so, I was creative executive, which basically is the first line of defense, so I had to read all the material that came in, and then I worked with writers to try to develop ideas into screenplays and try to pitch them to the studio to get them sold and hopefully eventually get them made.
Get one on the slate. Yeah. Because when you're working for the Disney operation makes more movies than most other operations, but even a big motion picture studio makes.
It used to, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right. Now who knows where it's all going to go, but at its peak, a big motion picture studio would make, 10 movies a year.
Yeah,
and,
more.
And people don't really do the math on the number of movies actually get made versus the great idea that you have for a story. And boy, if I could get this in the hands of, whoever.
Well, and it's funny though. I mean, people always say, I just need that one big idea. It's like every idea you've had, 6 guys in town already have.
Yeah.
So it's
right. And 5 of those guys
one, it's
wrote
execution.
something.
Yeah. First of all, it's execution. How well can you execute it? And second of all, it's getting it in the right hands of the right people at the right time.
Yep. That's the running into the fastball over the plate factor. Anyway, so after 10 years of that, you decided to come up here.
Yeah. So very shortly into
Glad you made it up here, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, were you done with the wine industry or done with the movie industry and ready to do this, or been done with the movie industry even if you didn't have this to go to?
It was a little bit of both. I started in very early on in my time there. I was introduced to a friend of a friend who was a winemaker up here, and I started taking a lot of trips up here to taste wine and learn more about wine, and eventually started taking classes at night after work to get certified as a sommelier, just for fun at first. Started writing a wine blog, started organizing these monthly wine tasting parties for all my friends' movie business in LA. And kind of before I knew it, I had built up this professional level of wine knowledge, again, just as a hobby at first. But then,
and with a bit of a following.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I kind of, became, to a certain subset of Hollywood people my age, I was the wine guy, Yeah, eventually, we, for 5 years at Disney, didn't get any movies made. And so eventually the first look deal, the studio for our company, was going away, and with it, my job. And I kind of had this, come to Jesus moment. Do I really want to fight my way back into the movie business? again, or should I give this wine thing a go? And I was, really, really passionate about wine and thought that I'd see where it was going to take me.
You had no vineyards or land purchased yet,
Oh, nothing. No.
Nothing, just
no. And
give it a go.
And at first I wasn't really sure if I was even going to move up here. I took a job as a sommelier for a ski resort at Lake Tahoe, the Royal Gorge Resort, that had 2 mountain lodges on the property, and I did the wine list for both of those lodges. And I was kind of going back and forth between Tahoe and LA.
Yeah.
For a while. And then I found out that Sonoma State had started this new graduate program, Wine MBA with a focus in the wine industry. And I thought, wow, that sounds like it was kind of made for me.
So on to your second postgraduate degree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I moved up here thinking, okay, I'm going to get this wine MBA, and then I'll probably go back to LA and do something, either, be sommelier to the stars or
I'm going to be sommelier to the stars. You'll see.
Yeah.
Still get that dream, right?
Yeah, who knows? Or continue writing about wine, maybe open a little wine bar or a little wine shop. I really did not have any preconceived notions about where it was going to go, but I had this buddy of mine, friend of a friend, who I had known for 5 or 6 years, who was a winemaker up here, Michael Scorsone. We started spending some time together when I moved up here, and after a couple of months, he said, "Hey, do you want to make some wine together?" And I said, "Fuck yeah, I do."
Yeah.
I've been waiting 5 years for you to ask me that.
All right. So he had already been making wine.
Yeah, he went to culinary school, and after that got his degree at UNLV, food and beverage management, and then moved to Napa, got a harvest job, just stuck around and worked his way up and got his first head winemaking job, I think 2008 at Adobe Road. So when I moved up here, he had been working at Adobe Road for a couple of years, and he had made a deal with them that he could make a little bit of his own wine on the side.
Okay.
And so he said, "Hey, you buy the grapes and I'll make the wine and we'll be partners," And I don't think either of us at the beginning knew that it would evolve into what it's become. We just thought it'd be a fun side project and
yeah, you're just horsing around.
Yeah. Made 200 cases that first year, which is probably more than we should have made. And then just kind of worked together. The second year I had kind of a slow.
Let's talk about the 200 cases that you made, though, because you say it was probably more than you should have made.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that makes you say that
what
now?
What year was this also?
2011.
2011
was our first vintage. Yeah.
Okay.
We made one wine, the Beckstoffer George's Third Napa Valley Cabernet.
Okay.
Made 8 barrels.
How'd it come out?
It came out great. And, it was funny. 2011, as wine geeks know, has kind of been
maligned.
Yeah, exactly. As a vintage, because it was a cooler, wetter year than is normal for Napa Valley. So the wines kind of are a little bit more like Bordeaux than they are Napa. And they really weren't that big, rich, sweet, intense fruit in their youth that you expect from Napa Cab. But the wines have evolved in a way that now everybody is chasing 2011s because the wines are aging terrifically.
We have several.
But we were slow to get our compliance in shape and our marketing in shape and licensing and everything to release the wine that by the time we released it, everyone had decided it was a bad vintage and nobody wanted 2011.
You released it mid-malign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to be first to market in a bad vintage,
Yeah, right. Get these out of here before everybody notices.
Yeah. Now, do you have any of those left?
Yeah, we do. We have about 10 cases left. We've been it was funny for a couple of years, anybody who wanted it, we were like,
Please.
Yeah, we'll give you a deal on a case. Take it. And we have a half a dozen people who bought more than 5 cases and a couple that bought more than 10 cases just like for personal consumption. And
now you're going,
yeah.
So and something
yeah,
to
now we doubled the price because we have such a small
scarcity
amount
now
left and it's so good and everyone wants it. So
okay.
Yeah.
So at the time you thought, well, maybe we shouldn't have made all these cases. It all comes out in the wash.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's good to have, Cabernet certainly is age worthy, so you have time to sell it. But vintage after vintage, inventory starts to pile up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in general, anything you make, you want to sell it within a year of releasing it, or you made too much.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Maybe you make a decision at the beginning, like, okay, we're going to hold back 5% for our library.
Yeah.
But other than that, you don't want to be sitting on a bunch of wine, even if it's wine that'll age well, because it compounds and compounds and compounds. That's how people get into trouble in this business, especially with something like Cabernet that, you're producing it today and you're not going to sell it for 3 or 4 years. So you have to predict your sales 3 or 4 years in advance, which is
which is part of why an MBA becomes necessary.
Yeah. People ask me, what's the biggest challenge? That's it right there. Managing the inventory, figuring out how much wine to make.
Forecasting.
Because making too much is a problem. Not making enough is a problem too.
Right. Wow. So how much did you make last year?
We'll see once it all gets bottled exactly how much it turns out to be, but estimates based on the crop is about 2,800 cases.
Wow.
Now, this is for both the Palmer and the...
Correct.
Scorsone.
Yeah. Domenica Amato, which is our brand where we do Rhone varieties and Mediterranean Italian
2,800
varieties.
Cases. That's just not a lot.
That is not a lot.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but for 2 guys in a barn, it's a lot of wine.
Well, okay. So for our listeners, I don't think we've revealed that what we're doing here and why this is so special is because you are 2 guys in a barn in this idyllic location. And it's unfortunate for our listeners that they can't see what we're seeing because we are sitting on a patio overlooking a vineyard. And this is just amazing. This view is idyllic and it's a storybook setting.
Yep.
And it's 2 guys making 2,800 cases of wine a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you guys are the definition of boutique.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, I say, if there's anything that you find charming about Northern California, everything on that list is right here in this spot.
Yep.
Well, and it's kind of a combination of that and the experience that we hope to provide to people here is the one that you hear about when people come back from a trip to Tuscany.
Yeah.
And they said, we just kind of pulled up this driveway and we didn't really know where we were. And this guy came out of this barn and he didn't speak English, but he invited us in and he poured us all this wine and it was amazing. And it was the most fun I ever had. And so we kind of want to do that.
And there was nobody else there.
Yeah. And so that's the experience we hope to provide to people. Like the key word is authenticity and what you see is what you get. It's literally Michael and I in these 2 barns making the wine, selling the wine. We have no employees. We have no investors, no consultants. It's literally just the 2 of us. And it's funny. I can say that exact thing to people sitting here at a tasting. And then 20 minutes later, they say, "Who's your winemaker?"
Right. Yeah.
Because that's kind of the culture here is like there's this rock star winemaker who's like this mythical creature. That's just not us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell people that, there's more places like this here in Sonoma than Napa. It's just, it's something you find in Sonoma more often. And this is what wine tasting is. It's not standing at a bar 4 people deep,
right,
trying to get your order in.
Yes.
That's how most of us started with wine tasting is you went to a bar and you stood to sit in seats with this kind of view.
And then you tasted and there were people behind you and you knew there were people behind you.
Yep.
Well, and the guy pouring the wine doesn't know the first thing about making it.
Yeah.
The winemaker very well may be pouring or Palmer and they, they own the company, they know the wine and you just have this view and this is what it's about. This is what you go home and tell other people about.
Yeah, and we didn't start with $1 billion. The kind of classic trope is how do you make a small fortune in the wine business? You start with a large fortune. And we started with very little. We leased this property. We got very lucky to find it. Very lucky to be able to make wine here. Most guys doing what we're doing without $1 billion, trying to make it on their own. They're making wine in a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah.
So we got very lucky that we found this couple that lives on this beautiful property and was willing to lease us the winery space and partner with us on growing the grapes here.
Spectacular. What an arrangement.
Yeah.
It is truly magical.
And people ask, what are your long-term goals? And our long-term goals are basically to do exactly what we're doing now, except eventually buy the property from our landlords, and that's pretty much it.
You don't want to grow and have distributed in Europe and...
Yeah, definitely not in Europe. We're doing a little bit of distribution, and I think eventually at some point we might look to get a warehouse space to make a little bit more wine because we're limited here. It's literally just 2 barns and it's permitted for 3,000 cases. And even that is a bit of a stretch here. So eventually if we grow a little bit, we might want to make the wine somewhere else, but or at least some of the wine somewhere else. But we want to stay small enough where we still have a personal connection to all the wines, to all the customers, to everybody that's opening a bottle. they know us.
Yeah. Well, we had that experience. We were lucky enough to come for a tasting with Pete, co-host Pete. This is Pete Crosby, who we reference on the show. Now, my permanent co-host is Pete Turner, who lives in Orange County, and we refer to Pete Crosby as the other Pete.
Other Pete.
Yep.
Except when I'm at Pete Crosby's house, we refer to Pete Turner as other Pete. But
That's cool.
yeah, we came up last weekend and sat here in these Adirondack chairs and looked at this vineyard. And you brought up some bottles and we were tasting, and the bottle that I looked at said Judge Palmer on it. And I said, "Isn't that Palmer?" And Pete said, "Yeah." And I thought, okay, this is terrific. This is the best right here. This is the connection that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then you started talking about making the wine, and it was such an intimate conversation about the nuances in the winemaking process that it made every taste so much more significant.
Yep.
Because you talked about every small piece of things that nobody in a tasting room who's pouring could ever begin to talk about. And it was just so much fun. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I learn everything I have from coming to small places like this, where they just really they have a lot of knowledge. And I've never read a book. I don't know I wouldn't say I know anything about wine, but anything I know, I learned from people who make wine at their wineries.
Yeah. So that's a great thing about Sonoma.
Yeah.
But we're here at the most special place in Sonoma.
Yeah.
The most special one. We try to do, our guest list is long and varied, and we're very lucky to talk to people who do interesting things, but we haven't had, I'm trying to think if we've had another winemaker on the show. I don't know that we have. You may be the first.
All right.
Yeah.
So you guys do a Pinot, right?
We've done a Pinot in the past. We're not currently.
Okay.
Michael kind of cut his teeth making Pinot Noir. He was the assistant winemaker at Fela for a long time. They make quite a few different really spectacular single vineyard Pinots out on the Sonoma coast and Russian River Valley and elsewhere. So when I first met him, that was what I was really into, and that's what he was making.
Yeah.
Did you want to make an Oregon style? Where you could say, because the first wine you might have tasted, was there a draw to that?
Kind of our philosophy in winemaking is that you can only make an Oregon style Pinot in Oregon.
Oh, okay.
What's happened with the Sonoma coast, the really prime areas where Michael was making wine from, they've become so sought after that if you're buying the grapes, which is the position we're in because we don't own the vineyard, you really have to pay a big premium for the grapes, and so it just became financially a little tough for us to kind of stay in the Pinot game. And we sort of believe that if you're going to do Pinot well, you should probably just stick to Pinot.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do a bunch of different things. So, we may do one on a one-off if we get an opportunity to get some grapes 1 year from a really special vineyard at a reasonable price. Then we'd do it again. But
so
Michael makes really special
lightning
Pinots.
strike 4 times in the same place. That kind
exactly.
of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
but we're talking about a business model that is centered around doing something the absolute best.
Right. No compromise as far as quality is
that
concerned.
is spectacular. There's nothing better than that, except to be able to do it here on this vineyard in a barn.
Now, do you live here?
I live just down the road in Santa Rosa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. What
and
a commute,
Michael
by the way.
lives down in the town of Sonoma. So I was living in San Francisco for a few years and commuting out here to this spot, and that was that was a little rough, but now
that's a challenge.
Now I'm in Sonoma County and a lot happier.
Yeah, I bet. So when you made the move up here, what were you have a family now?
I do.
What was your marital status when you moved up here? Did you have...
I was recently divorced, which was, one of the reasons I was willing to make this big life change. And I had started dating my now wife, Heather. And so I moved up here. And, at the time I moved up here, we had just started dating and I was just getting out of this divorce. So it wasn't, we weren't really thinking she needs to quit her life and move up here.
Yeah.
Also because I didn't really know that I was going to stay permanently.
Yeah. So there was just it was the right amount of, we're just figuring all this out.
Right. But we very quickly realized we did not want to be apart, and so she followed me up here 6 months later, and we got engaged.
Did she realize when she got here that it ain't so bad up here?
Yeah, kind of the opposite.
Oh, no.
She was happy with me, but not.
It didn't stick at
Sonoma
first.
County. Yeah, it was a big change, sleepy Sonoma County from the lifestyle that we had, in the movie business in LA. And so the compromise was San Francisco. So that's why we moved from Sonoma to SF. And then when we started our family, then it started to make a lot more sense to be out here closer to the winery. And
So what years were you in the city?
I was there from October of 2013 to March of 2019.
And how did you like it during those years?
I loved it.
Yeah. I lived there for 10 years and I liked it. It was great.
Yeah, we lived in the Marina District, which is a great place to live,
it's a great place to live.
Really easy in and out. It's kind of the perfect balance for me of, didn't really have any of the drawbacks of urban living.
Right.
Just kind of had all the positives. Like
all
I could walk to like really nice bars
great
and restaurants.
And
I could walk to the beach. I mean, San Francisco is not exactly beach weather, but I could go for a run. Go for a run along the water to the Golden Gate Bridge and back. 5 miles.
And if you like sailboats, it's great to look at sailboats right there. There, for our listeners who are not around here, because there are a lot of our listeners aren't close by. That commute is, it must have taken you an hour and a half to get here every day.
Sometimes it would take me. Sometimes it's 72 miles. So
if
there was no traffic, it was like an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So rush hour in the morning, it was about an hour and 20.
Yeah.
In the evening, could if I left like right at the worst rush, it could be like an hour and 45.
Yeah. So that gives it some context. It's great to live in the Marina if you love San Francisco, but where are you going? You want to get out of the sun?
Yeah, and if you don't have kids, but as soon as we had kids, then I needed to be home more.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
So it's not. This is a nice place, I think, to raise a family in California.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
So with this arrangement here, tell us about what's growing. We're on a hillside that sort of faces.
Yeah, so we kind of have this.
Right?
That steep hillside all the way in the back that faces west southwest.
Southwest. Okay.
So we're looking this way, kind of east northeast.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it gets a lot of sun.
And up on that kind of steep hillside, all the way at the far end of the vineyard there, the terrace block, we have Cabernet Sauvignon growing, and we make a single vineyard wine just from those vines on the hillside. It only makes about 100 cases or so a year, but it makes a completely different character of Cabernet from the rest of the grapes in the vineyard because of that steep hillside, the exposure to the sun, the drainage, the soil. Totally different character of wine, much more concentrated, intense. And then everything to the left of us here in this swale that kind of runs between us and that terraced hillside, everything to the left is more Cabernet. Everything to the right, the longer rows, is Grenache. There's a little bit more Cabernet in the far corner there on the opposite side of the pond. And then on this side of the pond, this tucked away corner here is Petite Syrah. And then behind us on the hillside, up by the house, is more Cabernet, another acre or so of Cabernet.
Wow, honey, do we have any of their Petite Syrah?
We have not done a single varietal Petite Syrah. We've only done it in a blend so far.
Got it. Okay, yeah. Not enough.
It makes we get about 2 tons from that little Petite Syrah block, which we get 4 or 5 barrels of wine. But it's the reason we grow it is for blending. It's such a great blending grape, so we use it in a couple of different blends. We use it in some of the cabs. We use it in the Grenache. We use it in our estate red blend that blends all 3 together. So.
Terrific.
And actually, when we came here, all the Grenache and Petite Syrah was Syrah, and we made the decision a couple of years ago to graft these vines over to Grenache and Petite Syrah because we felt like the climate here and the soil was better suited to Grenache.
Yeah. So even though you're leasing this land, your arrangement with your landlord is that you're controlling what's growing here.
Yeah, we partner on the vineyard, and we told them early on that
You had intentions.
we were interested in the Cabernet,
I see.
but the Syrah was going to be a tougher sell. We said, we might be able to find a slot in our lineup when we, ship wine to our wine club members, where we could make 100 cases of it and be pretty confident that we could sell it. But they were getting enough Syrah here to make, 10 times that. And there is no market for Syrah really, especially, warmer climate Syrah. It just wasn't our business. It wasn't something we wanted to tackle. And we didn't really, we thought it made good wine, but not world-class wine.
Yeah. So it was a compromise.
And so we said, you're going to have the market for Syrah being what it is, you're going to have a really hard time selling the rest of the grapes that we don't buy. But if you bud this over to Grenache for us, we'll commit to buying the whole vineyard.
Wow.
To buying all the grapes. And so that's what they did. It was a little bit of a cost for them to get the grafting done. And then that first year we suffered a bit in terms of the yield.
Yeah.
But they've since then more than made up for their initial investment, because the Grenache, we agreed to pay a county average price, and the Grenache gets 50% more, and it yields quite a bit more than the Syrah did. It's a hardier vine. So
terrific.
So they've already made up the difference of their investment.
So you guys are a great vineyard partner.
Yeah, we think so.
Yeah.
And you do a full Grenache, though.
We do.
Okay,
yeah.
So what are your intentions for, as if you're looking ahead to what you're going to do with this operation and the wines that you sort of aspire to make, and what you want to do to rotate, what's growing out here? Is that a factor? I mean, that's a lot to balance. You're talking about what, proportions of this land you have, which is great in your description, but it is a finite amount of land.
Yeah.
You're only going to get so many grapes out of it.
Yeah, and it produces about half of our production comes from the estate vineyard, and then half comes from grapes that we purchase from elsewhere. And, again, that's part of our philosophy. If you have one particular plot of land with the soil type and the climate type, you're going to be able to make, 1, 2, maybe 3 kind of world-class wines if you really dial it in.
Wow.
But we want to make 12 world-class wines.
Yeah. So you have to look elsewhere.
And so we're looking elsewhere, and so we're making the Cabernet that grows here, but we're also exploring different expressions of Cabernet vineyards from Napa Valley, from Alexander Valley. So we make, depending on the year, 4 or 5 different Cabernets. We make a bunch of white wines. We don't have any white grapes growing here, so we're sourcing white grapes from a bunch of different cooler climate spots than what we have here in Dry Creek Valley. So in Sonoma County, that generally means either up in the mountains or out closer to the coast, or down south by the bay in Carneros. All of those places have cooling influences. And
did you get some grapes from Monterey too?
We have not done anything from Monterey, but we do the Fiano from Clarksburg outside of Sacramento. That's the only non-Sonoma Napa wine that we've made.
Wow. Okay.
What do you see?
So long term, just to finish answering your question, we want to continue to make better and better wines from this property. Dial in the farming, dial in the proper blends for the blend we want to make. And then eventually we'd like to maybe consider getting some white grapes in here that'll do well. It's, like I said, it's a little hard in these warmer climate spots to make a world-class white, but there are certain grapes that can do it, some of the Rhone and Italian grapes. So we'd like to plant this block up here to some sort of a white field blend that kind of expresses Michael's Italian heritage and something that is going to be hopefully very unique to us, because there's not a lot of people growing those grapes here.
Now you do a field blend too, right? Right now, do you have one?
We do, yeah. We decided to blend, even though they're not kind of typically blended together, Cabernet, Petite Syrah, and Grenache, because they're growing here. It's an expression of our land, of our place that's unique to us. So we decided to do the blend of those 3 grapes.
And talk a little bit about a field blend, how it's different than other blends.
Yeah, so I mean, ours it's not kind of technically a field blend, but it sort of is. Historically, in California, especially when vineyards were first planted here, 150 years ago, one of the ways that you could kind kind of hedge your bets from year to year of a good or a bad vintage, or to make a balanced wine, is to plant a bunch of different varieties side by side in the same vineyard and just pick all the grapes together. They're all going to ripen a little bit differently, have good years, bad years. Some are going to have more sugar, some more acid, some more flavor, some more tannin. But generally, you can get a somewhat consistent result if you have all those different grapes growing together in a field. So there's a lot of historic vineyards in California that are those kind of field blends.
But also it would all be processed at the same time and aged
Right.
in the same barrel.
Right, exactly. So
sometimes you'll blend wines that are aging in two separate barrels.
And that's the one way in which the wine we make here is somewhat like a field blend, and that is, well, one, they're growing in the same place. Two, we ferment them together.
Yeah.
Whereas mostly with blends, you're picking the grapes separately because they're ripening at different rates, and fermenting them separately. And then in a lot of cases, aging them separately too, and just assembling a blend right before bottling. And this is kind of becomes its own thing immediately. We harvest the grapes, crush them together in the same tank, and they ferment together, age together.
It just seems like more fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be an older style, right? I mean, way back before, and the vessels were very precious and expensive probably. So just put the grapes together.
I mean, the first guy to blend just before bottling probably got what are you doing? So.
Well, historically, so many of the great wines of the world are blends. It's kind of really a Californian invention of the last kind of 60 or 70 years to label wines with the name of the grape variety on them. In Europe, you see even the wines that are
Rhone
monovarietal, they have the name of the village on them, or the name of the vineyard, or the name of the town. They don't have Cabernet Sauvignon.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Because wine is about a place.
It's about a place.
If you really get kind of deeply into fine wine, you realize that it's an expression of the place. That's what this French word terroir means, and that's what kind of all really serious winemakers are after, that kind of pure expression of the place, of the soil, of the climate, that's unique to each plot of land.
That's probably why it's such a big part of the sommelier education, to be able to identify regions, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And for me, that's so much of the fun, is how wine is kind of tied to, history and geography and culture in all these interesting ways. And you can learn so much about a place by the wines that come out of there, the food that come out of there.
Yeah.
So can you, at least in some circumstances, identify a wine down to the row of the vineyard?
I mean, I'm sure. I mean, there definitely are people that can, especially if you're, a French winemaker who's growing Pinot Noir in a lot of those different spots, and you have 30 years of experience doing them, and you're fermenting them all separately every year.
Yeah.
Then I'm sure you can. I mean, the extent to which just a sommelier, just based on their palate,
can walk up to a bottle with their palate and nothing else.
I mean, it really depends, certainly on the talent, but a lot is based on the experience. If they've tasted that wine over and over again, then yes, they can. But just kind of blind, it takes a lot of kind of practice. And
there's a lot of variable
tasting. There's a lot of drinking involved in that.
That's the only thing you do, is be a sommelier.
Yeah, and there is a what they call the systematic approach to tasting, a way that you learn to taste so that you are able to recognize those things. So a lot of it can be taught. A lot of it is innate ability, but so much of it is experience. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so people ask me, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna test you. We want to pour your own wines for you blind. You think you'll be able to figure them out?" I'm like, "Yeah, my own wines? Yeah, absolutely."
Yeah, right. Just out of pure familiarity. Yeah. What about the consumer trends? I mean, we seem to be drinking a lot more wine now that we're in quarantine land.
Yep.
And in this circumstance, it seems like people who are drinking more wine, you can go two directions. You can either drink more wine and appreciate wine a little more and in a little more detail, or you can just drink more wine.
Yep.
And spend a little more time drunk. What are you seeing, and what do you think, if you're predicting the future, how much more appreciating do you think we're going to do?
I think we're doing a lot more appreciating, and I think the reason why is, for me, fine wine always goes with food.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many more people in this quarantine are enjoying wine with dinner every night. And I think that's really the best way to not only enjoy wine, but to learn more about it.
Then they'll go out and order a glass of wine at a restaurant and the next time they can do it. And the whole food, they've driven each other, but the food revolution has fueled the craft cocktail revolution.
Sure.
You know, just fresh ingredients. It doesn't have to be fancy, but not a sweet and sour mix. Get 2 limes, just squeeze them. Takes a few extra seconds, and now you put a 1 in front of the price of the drink. An $8 drink becomes $18. That's it.
Yes.
Get an edible flower, 1 of them, boom, $18.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that I'm seeing, which has been kind of surprising to me, and this is not a recent kind of summer phenomenon. This was happening in March. We're selling a lot more white wine, and I think normally men don't drink a lot of white wine, especially, well, I think anywhere, home or in a restaurant environment. They generally order red.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think men are stuck at home with their wives and they're drinking the white wines.
And discovering
along
white
with their
wines.
wines and discovering how great white wine can be.
Yeah.
You know?
That's great.
And
I hope that opens it up.
Yeah, me too, because I love white wine. I love the kind of, vast realm in between Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. I don't drink very much of either of those two things. We make a little bit of both, but what we really love is, Grenache Blanc and Fiano and Vermentino and Viognier and all these fun Rhone and Italian and Alsatian varietals that make really terrific wine that most people are just not familiar with because they're just stuck in the Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, maybe Pinot Grigio. They've heard of Riesling. They don't like it. And that's it.
They all they're not all sweet, but they all think they are.
Yeah. Making white wines masculine.
Yeah. I love white wine. Yeah. Especially, and here now, summer is really August through the beginning of October. That's what summer is now. Used to be, June, July, August, and, a little bit of September. Now it's kind of moved over. So,
would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I guess it depends on exactly where you live in the Bay. The weather can be so different if you're in San Francisco or or Petaluma or Santa Rosa or Healdsburg. Totally different weather.
Climates are very micro.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Yeah. You know what though? I want to get back to your $18 cocktail because I don't want our listeners to hear that and think you're making light of that because you throw an edible flower in there and then you move the you put a 1 in front of the price of the drink. But a lot of that means that you've used fresh ingredients and you make the drink worth $18.
Yes. Well, they're all fresh made.
Yeah.
Every element of it is fresh made.
I remember the first time I had a fresh made cocktail, how impressed I was. I was at a restaurant in the city that is not a sponsor. So it was McCormick and Colettos. And I ordered a Greyhound and they got this bucket glass that was a big hearty bucket glass that I thought, oh, that's a great looking glass. And then they chipped off a bunch of ice and they put it in there. And their well vodka was Grey Goose. And they poured Grey Goose in there and then they cut open a ruby red grapefruit and squeezed the whole grapefruit into there. And that drink was delicious.
Yeah. Refreshing.
And thankfully I was not the one paying for it.
I'm sure that's not kind of unique to San Francisco, but there are a lot of bars and restaurants in San Francisco that make that Greyhound, and I had never drank Greyhounds. Didn't like grapefruit juice. But the first time I had one of those fresh made Greyhounds at this crappy little dive bar in the Marina campus, I was like, oh, I want to drink 6 of these.
Yeah, right now. Exactly.
And it's funny you say a little dive place because, San Francisco just has this level that you must be to be there. And Kathleen and I were on Geary, baby? Waiting, okay. So we just dive into this bar and it looks like Jeb, put the axe down,
Yeah.
That's that kind of place. She orders a margarita and he just gets out limes and just,
Start
guy
squeezing.
with the mustache like this just starts squeezing them and making a, this little dive bar, just a, homemade, and it was excellent.
Yeah, but you paid $18 for it.
No, it was probably like 13.
Okay.
It was reasonable.
All right.
But
a reasonable 13 for fresh squeezed stuff. But it's nice to have
shaved ice
standards.
That's really nice.
Where what you appreciate is really worth it and what you pay for these things. And I mentioned this because, we were here, we bought a few bottles of wine when we were here last weekend and everything was just fantastic. I mean, we left here with exactly the experience that you that you are aiming to create, which is a connection with the wine, the winemaker, that you're here in the land. We're not sitting in the soil, but it's right there.
Yeah. So I was going to say, you have this beautiful patio, but also if you come for a second visit, there's a
picnic table
out in the vineyard among the grapes, and you can also, underneath a tree, you can go out there too. And so then you really can feel the soil.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's great. So for our listeners who are in the area or planning to travel to the area, when travel becomes a thing again, come out to the Sonoma Dry Creek Valley and, come and pay a visit to this beautiful place. We should tag your website, which is Emmit-Scorsone.com.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Emmit-Scorsone.com.
So just like it sounds, Emmit-Scorsone.com. There you will see bios on Palmer and Michael, and you'll get a chance to be familiar with the place, and you'll get a chance to do everything that a website allows you to do. So go in there and do it.
Come out here and call them and schedule to taste some wine.
It's by appointment, and all the info is there on the website.
And they are COVID compliant.
COVID compliant.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely safe. Everything's outside.
We're kind of COVID compliant
all the time.
It's always outside. It's always groups of 6 or less.
Yeah, and
there's always only one group here at a time.
One group at a time. So listen to that guy. One group at a time. You will have the entire attention of whoever's pouring for you, and just this beautiful view, and not have to share it with anyone. Just your group.
And whoever's pouring for you is not going to be like a 23-year-old.
Exactly.
It's me or Michael. It's the guys that made the wine.
Yeah. So the winemaker. So
I was absolutely.
He's a little better looking than me. I'm a little more charming than him.
Who's the actor he looks like? Yes, Mark Ruffalo.
Michael looks like Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo.
He's got a big head of Sicilian hair.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, all right, ladies, come on out. So seriously though, this is one of the things that we love about this part of the world that is just not something that you can enjoy practically anywhere else.
No.
In this specific place is, it's just magnificent, and it's very affordable.
Yes.
To come out and have an experience of this caliber, you'll be surprised at how affordable it is.
I remember someone told me like the Prince of Dubai
in
the early 2000s would come out to Sonoma, fly to Sonoma in his private jet and spend like 3 or 4 days in Sonoma and then go back.
Yeah.
It's funny how often people come to their Napa wine trip that they do every year.
Yep.
And they're here for 3 or 4 days, and the tour guide that they hire talks them into on the 4th day, do a day in Sonoma. And then they come here and then they say, we're never going back to Napa again.
Why did we spend those first 4 days in Napa?
Yep.
That's true. I'm not here to poo-poo the Napa Valley because it's great as a region. Exactly.
If you like Cabernet and you got a lot of money to spend, go to Napa. You're going to have a terrific time. It's a beautiful place. They make the best Cabernet in the world.
And they'll help you spend that lot of money.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
and there's, obviously great dining establishments there, but we're coming up in the world here in Healdsburg too. We have a 3 Michelin star restaurant now in Healdsburg, Single Thread, and a bunch of other
3 Michelin stars.
Really terrific.
There's 13 13 or 14 in the country, and there's 7 in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And the rest are in New York, except for one in Chicago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Well, and it's a really easy place to spend several days of vacation.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can help with that too. Shoot me an email. I love to turn you on to some other great wineries in the area. Send you to visit some of my favorite chefs in the area, and give you some ideas for things to do that are not related to food and wine, because there's a lot of other great stuff in Sonoma County as well.
Hiking, biking, kayaking.
Yeah, everything that you would associate
surfing.
with having a good time in Northern California, you can have right here. So if we're looking ahead at the industry and the changes that have happened in the last year, does it change your mission at all, or does it change the details of your mission in the coming few years and what you're going to grow here, the wines that you're going to make?
No, I mean, I think staying small and kind of true to ourselves in the way that we do, we hope that it's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to discover us. It might set our timeline back a year or two, but we're going to continue doing things the way we do them, and we think there's always going to be a little niche for small guys who do things well, who do it really well.
Yep.
People are always kind of searching for that undiscovered gem, and so we'd like to kind of stay undiscovered.
Yeah.
Could be a silver lining, though, the whole
as long
COVID
as
thing.
Possible. Yeah.
Is that people are forced to stay a little bit local, and they're kind of discovering what's available local that,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are still
well,
buying
and
on
they're
Amazon and
becoming they're becoming a little bit more used to the idea of buying wine online and having it shipped to them, which helps us a lot because we're not distributed in 50 states. We're distributed in 4 states, and even in those states, you can't get most of the 15 wines we make. You can get 1 or 2.
What are the states, by the way?
We're in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Illinois, and then we have a broker here in California that does some trade sales, but mainly restaurants. In all of those places. There's a little bit of retail.
Can you ship to Oregon?
Yeah, we can ship to a lot of states.
Okay, good.
Oregon and Washington are easy ones because we have a reciprocal arrangement with the wineries there, so we don't even need a license to ship there.
That's great.
We have the proper shipping licenses to most of the states that we're allowed to have them in.
Good.
Yeah, so it's just kind of Utah, Kentucky, West Virginia, and New Hampshire, I think, are places we can't ship currently, but
that's not many.
Yeah, you can come here from the East Coast, make your first trip to Northern California, discover Judge Palmer, and go back and enjoy the wine and have it shipped to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not have to say goodbye.
And have the greatest story to tell your friends every time you open a bottle.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're doing virtual tastings too, which have been a ton of fun. Send people a couple bottles of wine. They either get together in a group with their family at one place, or we log in remotely with friends from all over the country. I've had as many as
and then they do the tasting with you as the host.
19 people in a Zoom room with me tasting the wines, and
Wow.
we all talk about them. Everybody asks questions and tells me what they're tasting, and teach them about what we do, and it's been a ton of fun. Yeah,
wow. That's cool.
It's been great.
Fantastic.
So can you tell us a little bit about the soil and how it's different? Like you said, on the hillside, is it just because it's higher up in the mountain that it's a different layer of, or is it about drainage? And
it's mainly about drainage. Yeah,
Okay.
we don't necessarily have a lot of soil diversity within the vineyard here. It's all kind of the same slightly gravelly loam. They call it Laughlin loam up here.
Okay.
But it definitely is more porous, less topsoil, much better drainage up on the hillside. And so you get, smaller berries with more concentrated flavors.
Because they literally are taking up less water?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the process, the winemaking process, what did you have to do? What did you have to be sensitive to? Describe how you honored that harvest with.
Yeah. So, I mean, Grenache, a lot of our philosophies kind of are pretty consistent across all the different varieties. And that is we do what's called spontaneous fermentation with native yeast, which means we don't actually add yeast to the wine. Most wineries, especially larger wineries,
They want to speed the process.
They buy cultured yeast from a lab that is going to have a specific kind of impact on the wine, and we let the native yeast that just come in off the vineyard on the grapes.
Wow.
We let those ferment the wines.
So you're tasting the vineyard.
And the people who learn winemaking at UC Davis are taught that that's no, that is very risky, and you get yeasts that aren't strong enough to complete the fermentation, that aren't able to kind of compete with the spoilage bacteria in the fermentation process, and so you get wines that won't finish fermentation, or that get lactic acid bacteria or other spoilage yeast, and so they don't tend to do that. The guys who have been trained at Davis, but a lot of the kind of renowned historic wineries in Europe have always done it that way and still continue to do it that day, and most of the artisan producers like us do it that way, and especially there's the big natural wine movement going on in the U.S. now. And people don't necessarily agree on all the tenets of natural wine, but that is one that everybody agrees on, native yeast, spontaneous fermentation.
Wow. That's great.
So we just kind of crush the grapes. Grenache is a pretty thin-skinned grape, so you don't have to really mash it up in the crusher like you might want to do with Cab to extract tannins. In fact, we try to leave a little bit of this whole berry where we don't destem the grapes. We leave a small percentage of the whole clusters undisturbed in the wine, and so you get a little bit of kind of earthiness and tannin from the stems. But what you also get is the grapes ferment a little bit differently because they're not as exposed to oxygen, so they get a small amount of what's called carbonic maceration. They kind of ferment from the inside out, and they give you a little bit more of a fruity flavor profile. So you get a lot more complexity that way. You get both the fruitiness from the carbonic maceration, but you get also some earthiness from the stems, and you get these kind of layers of complexity in the wine.
Do you filter all your wines?
We don't. We filter most of the white wines, which is one way that we depart minimally from what would kind of strictly be considered natural wine. Although most of our reds are unfiltered, this one is unfiltered.
Okay. I don't see much sediment. So
yeah, if you're careful to rack the wines off the lees, especially if you leave them longer in barrel, give them more time to kind of clarify on their own.
I see. Okay.
You won't get a lot of sediment.
Is this vegan?
It is. I think most wines are vegan. Nobody tends to advertise them that way.
I thought there was some kind of like eggshell or some kind of process,
Some people do egg white fining, although most commercial wineries these days don't. They do a bentonite, which is a clay-based fining. There are some smaller producers, especially in Europe, that still do egg white fining. And that's part of the reason we don't sort of advertise all our wines as vegan, because we will from time to time do egg white fining, but it's pretty rare that we do it. So that would be one thing that might technically make the wine not vegan, although the egg whites don't remain in the wine. They kind of they bind up to solids in solution, and then they drop out and you rack it off. So you're not actually leaving any egg whites in it.
Yeah.
If it's used in production, I guess maybe that's not
if it just
technically
it's
vegan.
like declaring a vegetable not vegan because a cow walked by.
Right. And the other one that's pretty common is people use this fish emulsion in the vineyards to fertilize the vineyards. And I had a group of 6 vegans here, and I'm like, well, you tell me, what do you think? Do you think that's vegan or not? They're like, yeah, I guess that would be fine.
I mean,
but technically if it's going in the vineyard, then maybe it's ending up in the grapes. And
so
if we're
a snail dies, right, and then the roots absorb it. So there are proteins, there are insects, there are animals that are going to be absorbed. So that's a little bit much, I think.
If we're going that far into the technicality, it's probably it's negligible. If you're paying that close attention, I respect it. But how about pay close attention to the wine and the what you're getting out of it?
Yep.
It's delicious.
Yeah, and then Grenache is something that is a grape that makes it pretty easy on you. It tends to ferment pretty quickly. You measure the bricks throughout the fermentation. You generally harvest the grapes somewhere between 20 and 25, and then you're looking, once it starts fermenting, you're measuring every morning that specific gravity, basically the kind of density to give you an estimate of how much sugar remains in the wine. And with Cabernet, you're really hoping that it moves like 2 points every day, 24, 22, 20, 18. Grenache will like pick it at 22. It'll start fermenting one day. It'll be at 20, and then we'll come in the next morning. It's 3.
Wow.
just goes hot and fast. And we don't
volatile.
We don't use temperature control, so we're not like setting it at a temperature or heating up the tank to get it. We're letting it make its own heat, and it'll make a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Wow.
It'll make
it's an Italian style wine with an Italian style temper.
Yep. Yeah, and then we age this in French oak. We used in this wine, we made 7 barrels of this wine. 2 of the barrels were brand new barrels, and 5 that had been used a couple of times on various different wines. So they're kind of more neutral, didn't have a lot of that new oak flavor on them. And we tend to use barrels for all our wines, even the Cab, where you want a little bit of that oak. We tend to use kind of lesser toast, tighter grain, stuff that's going to have less of an impact in terms of the sweetness and like the real oakiness, what people are used to, with like the vanilla, that type of flavor. We're looking for barrels that kind of add layers and complexity. And the Bertrange forest in France that we use on this wine has a very floral component to it, very mineral component to it. And those are things that we like in this kind of more delicate style of Grenache. We're not trying to punch you in the face, with a big sweet bomb.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I love that it's delicate.
I don't think you guys tasted this one last time. Did we
doesn't
taste
look
our
like
new? So this is a brand new wine that we just bottled, and
Old
I did
vine.
we've been
not
doing
escape
everything
with a bottle of that.
for the last few years in our Grenache and Grenache Blanc and the Rhone and Italian style wines in this Domenica Amato label named after Michael's grandmother, and our Cabernets in the Judge Palmer label named after my grandfather. And this year we started a third brand, which is the Emmit-Scorsone brand, and we did some
that is
Grenache
inky.
Blanc. We did some Grenache,
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
we did this Cabernet. And the idea with these wines is that we're going to sell them primarily. The hope is for more retail stores to sell these wines. Our Judge Palmer and Domenica wines are priced a little bit higher. They tend to make sense on a restaurant wine list by the bottle, or direct to consumer. These wines are aimed a little bit more towards by the glass placements and retail stores. So this is going to retail for $30, and you are not going to find a Cabernet anywhere, I don't think, that tastes like this for $30.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
You are not going to find a Cabernet anywhere, I don't think, that tastes like this for $30. And it's mostly, we called it Old Vines, Dry Creek Valley. It's mostly from the estate. It's not labeled estate because it's not 95% from the estate, which it would have to be called
To be certified estate.
So
Okay.
it's about 85% from the property, and the rest is Alexander Valley.
But it's all cab.
But it's all cab.
100% cab.
100% cab, yeah. And aged in not a single new barrel in the bunch.
Sure.
It's all barrels that have been used once or twice on our other Cabernets. But it's not lacking for anything, not lacking for body, for texture, for that richness that you get from the oak.
And man, food.
Yeah.
Just imagine
Yeah.
food would be so good with this.
And I failed to mention that we do farm this vineyard organically. It's not certified organic. It's certified sustainable, and it's been farmed organically for about the last 8 years.
What does it mean to be certified organic?
$20,000?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's a price tag,
Yeah.
right? That's what we're talking about,
yeah,
the difference between price and
Exactly.
certification.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't necessarily pencil out for a small vineyard like this to go through the process. At some point the marketplace may demand that certification, and we'll have to go through it. But for now, I think people who know us and know the way we do things, they're going to trust that we're being responsible stewards of the land and making wines in a way that are consistent with the principles of sustainability and organic farming. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that hopefully everybody gets the message that your practices are best practices in
Right.
every way that
Yeah.
really counts for making wine.
Yeah.
And
we
else's
could split hairs on a few
certification
things,
on
but
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. To get back to the natural wine movement, which is a big trend. There really is no strict definition of what natural wine is. So we don't tend to advertise ourselves as natural wine producers, even though most of the wines we produce would check
The boxes.
most, if not all, of the natural wine boxes.
Yeah.
We don't use any additives in the production other than sulfur. We try to use the least amount of sulfur we have to use to keep the wine safe from spoilage. Some natural wine producers will say, well, you can't use any. And some will say, well, you can use it, but only at this point, only right before bottling. And if we're going to use a small amount of sulfur, I don't know why it would matter that if we put it in today or tomorrow. We're a little bit more kind of flexible with our approach, but again, try to kind of follow the best practices, but also not be afraid to do something if we feel like it's going to make the wine better, but it doesn't fit into somebody's ideology of how you're supposed to make wine. We're not going to limit ourselves.
Yeah.
And most wine uses sulfur, right? Most wineries will use sulfur.
Yeah, I mean, all but a few really, hardcore natural wine producers.
Yeah, and it's just to protect from spoilage.
It has a lot of uses, and that's one of the reasons that we don't want to limit ourselves. So when we use it,
I see.
We like to use it earlier in the process because what the sulfur will do, a lot of the spoilage bacteria are a lot more sensitive to sulfur than the yeast that ferments the wine. So Michael's quote is, I think sulfur is a great tool in natural winemaking because if you can kind of isolate your native yeast and give it a fighting
and let
chance,
it thrive,
then you're going to have you're going to be more likely that native yeast is going to be able to work through the fermentation and not have to add a cultured yeast later on in the process.
Oh yeah,
which
is more natural.
Yeah, which we basically have never had to do. Like I don't. You can't find an invoice for yeast in my winery because we never bought it, even to the point where once in a while people say, well, that's impossible. You must get stuck fermentations all the time. And even if we do get a stuck fermentation, we can do a build up just with the population of native yeast in there. We can either, we can add sulfur to kill off whatever bad bacteria has grown in there, and then just, isolate a small batch of wine, give it a little bit of heat, and get it back going again without having to add a cultured yeast.
You know what'd be great? A really peppery short rib, just an unctuous short rib.
Some kind of red meat.
Yeah.
Some kind of red meat.
Yeah, this wine does have a little bit more of a peppery character than a lot of our cabs. Part of that is, I think, maybe not having that is kind of the one of the natural characteristics of cab that is a lot of times either masked by the oak or sort of less present because people in Napa and Sonoma tend to let their cab get really, really ripe before they pick it, and this kind of has a little bit more of that Bordeaux like vegetal character because we picked it really early. We picked it between the different blocks in the vineyard were picked between 23.5 and 24 bricks, and normally for cab in Napa and Sonoma, they don't want to talk to you until it's 25, and a lot of people are picking 26, 27 and then adding water back and and tartaric acid and
Still a lot of plum in the nose. That's great.
Yeah, that plummy character people associate a lot with Merlot, but I think it's definitely present in a lot of these cabs, especially when you pick it on the earlier side. You get more of that stone fruit character, which I really like in cab.
Yeah, absolutely. God, that is terrific.
Yeah.
I really want virtual tastings to work. I hope people get into it because it's a really great way to experience.
We'll have to check it out.
Yeah. It's. We should make one, and we should invite people from a lot of other places to do it. And I'm trying to think, who would I buy a bottle of wine for and have it shipped? Who's going to open it and appreciate it? And that list.
I had a group of women, all my old friends from the movie business in LA, and that was the one that ended up growing. We did 8 out of 10 Wednesdays, 2 wines each week, and one of those weeks we had 19 people in the Zoom room. We just had a ton of fun. We went through every wine we make, and they learned a ton along the way, and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. We'll have to think about who we want to recruit.
Yeah.
God, as delicious as this tastes, it really smells great. It's got such a great nose. I just sit and Just sit and live with it all
I've
day.
only got a little bit left, and it's still
Still
aromatic.
pungent.
Yeah. Now, is this a port?
It is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wasn't sure if you had ever poured that
I
for you.
don't think we've ever tried
No.
the port.
Yeah. So this is kind of a classic, two guys in a barn, just running on pure passion, getting inspired and doing something really strange, and committing to a 5-year process of doing it. So we call this the gavel, and it is a Madeira style kind of white port made mainly from Sauvignon Blanc.
Wow.
And we age this in what's called a Solera. So that is a common aging method in sherry. It is done with other spirits, with some Madeira wines. There's actually even a guy up in Mendocino County, I think, who does a red wine in Solera. But basically, what that means is you're kind of blending different vintages together over time, and you have this system of barrels, and what you bottle out of is the bottom section of barrels, which are the oldest wines. But you never bottle the entire barrel. You bottle maybe half of it. You fill that up with the wine that's slightly younger. You fill that up with wine that's slightly younger than that, and then maybe depending on how many layers of your Solera you have, eventually you fill up the top barrel with new wine. This makes
it way down.
This is a 3-year Solera, and so it has wine in it from 2014, 2015, and 2016. The minimum age is 3 years, the average age is 4 years. But we didn't bottle the whole barrel, so when we bottle it next year, it'll be a mix of 2014, 2015, 2016, and a little bit of 2017.
Wow.
And so on. We'll keep going. We'll bottle it every year. And actually, we're thinking about maybe expanding it and making it a 4 or a 5-year Solera, so we get a little bit more aging, a little bit more of that
poached pears in a caramel sauce.
Oh,
yeah, and it's kind of, we had a little bit of red wine in our glass, so the color got a little bit tweaked. Let me show you what the color is supposed to look like.
Oh.
Right, with poached pears in a caramel sauce.
Yeah, so the white wine over time, oxidizes a little bit, and it starts to turn orange, starts to turn brown. This is kind of like it's not quite amber. It's kind of a deep orange, I would say.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's a great color.
And it's all Sauvignon Blanc.
Wow.
There's a little bit, there's about 5% Semillon in it. And we started with orange wine Sauvignon Blanc that had been fermented with the skins, so it started out a little bit orange. And then
Do you pick the grapes later?
That is fantastic.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
We didn't. We are doing that now. The first couple years, what happened was we had our skin fermented Sauvignon Blanc that we made in 2014. The last 2 barrels that came out of the press had like a very, very pungent, very tannic feel to them. They just didn't fit with the rest of the Sauvignon Blanc wine that we were trying to make. So we pulled them out of the blend. We didn't know what we were going to do with them. They sat in the winery for a couple of years. And then I had this bright idea of, well, let's add some sweeter wine to it and fortify it and turn it into a Madeira. And so that's what we did.
Wow.
I do not typically like ports, and this is just delicious.
It's really, there's so many things that it would go well with. Cheese plate, just grapes, just like fruit,
plate.
Just strawberries and grapes.
I think that the like classic after dinner cheese plate is what is perfect with this.
Some blue cheese.
You got some nuts on there, some assortment of different cheeses. You've got some honey on there.
Yeah, maybe some dates.
Yeah, exactly. Quince paste, all that stuff. Figs. All that with this wine, I think is really the perfect thing. We've done a couple of wine dinners with it.
This is fantastic. I'm just rejoicing this thing.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
The one thing that's really difficult with it is chocolate.
Oh,
Yeah.
And the first wine dinner I did with it, or not the first, but I did one this year, and they did a chocolate mousse with it, and I was like, oh no.
and how was it?
It was not terrific.
It wasn't right.
Yeah, I literally sat down.
That's the
and
thing is that we went around the
and nobody said
room.
chocolate.
Nobody
right?
said chocolate,
right?
yeah.
And so I literally I was doing my rounds at the winemaker dinner. I went around to all the tables, and then I sat down and I had my bite of chocolate mousse, and I had my little sip of the gavel, and somebody from the other side of the table was kind of watching me.
Yeah.
And they saw the look on my face. They're like, "What was that? What was that look? What was that look?
Yeah.
You didn't like that, did you?"
Wow.
But then a couple of weeks later, I did another dinner at the Fort Worth Club in Dallas, and they nailed it. Dang it, I'm gonna have to.
So first of all, how much is this a bottle?
This is $60 a bottle, and
Okay.
it's a 500 milliliter bottle, so it's
Oh,
halfway in between a half
cool.
bottle and a full bottle.
But
Yeah.
we're going to be getting
And
one.
we made 300 bottles.
Wow.
Oh,
And the goal is to kind of continue to make about that much.
please
every
do
year.
that
Yeah.
because this shit is magical.
Yeah. It's really good.
I mean, you poured us some great wines, and we've been talking about great wines and great flavor combinations and all the subtleties. This is just the capper. This is magical.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it just kind of exceeded our wildest
Isn't
dreams
that great
for how
though?
good
Yeah.
When it's just better than you
this
think
thing
expect.
could ever turn out.
Yeah.
I mean, what really stands out to me about this wine is the finish. I mean, you put this in your mouth and you're still tasting it a minute later,
Yeah.
a minute and a half later. I mean, it is an epic finish, which to me, people say, how do you figure out what's a good wine? That's number one, the
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, I agree. And God, what was I drinking recently that
Yeah, this is so strong.
it was a
Just
decent,
in every category.
attack initially, but then it evaporated. It wasn't a bad finish. It just evaporated. It was just
Right.
gone
right?
after,
Right.
3/4 of a second in my mouth. It just evaporated. And it's like I'm missing.
And okay, you got to enjoy it in the
Yeah.
beginning, but this just
it doesn't linger.
stays.
There should be some linger.
And I didn't notice that that's what it was, but I mean, I put my glass down and I just breathing in and out for a little while, and then it hits me again like, this is so good.
We have a bunch of Gravenstein apples we just picked
Uh-huh.
from an apple orchard, and we invited you actually, or I think
Yeah,
you sent it
yeah.
to Christy.
Yeah.
So we're going to be making apple pies, and I think this with a little bit of ice cream on a fresh, warm slice of apple pie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to find the menu from the Fort Worth Club dinner I did. I think it was an apple. I think there was some
Right.
apple in it.
Right, that'd just be
Yeah.
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much. This
Yeah.
was a great
Yeah,
capper.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you.
This
glad
is
you
what it's
enjoyed
like.
it.
This is kind of the experience,
That's the
You
funny
learn
thing is
about
we've
it.
been describing this experience
And then
to,
we
to
just
our
did one.
listeners from elsewhere.
Yeah.
And
Here it is. They nailed it. It was not an apple. It was a Grand Marnier souffle with honeycomb, toasted hazelnuts,
Uh-huh.
and a caramel sauce.
Yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah.
It was
and it's
so
the
good.
toasted hazelnuts that
Yep.
kind of just take
Yep.
it in the direction.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Wow.
So
So
come out and see
for our
this with-
listeners,
Yeah.
seriously, I mean, it's almost if you did not grow up in this environment. And, when I was growing up, my parents ate well and they took us to restaurants and stuff, but we didn't really start to understand the subtleties
Mhm.
until much later. And when you do get into it and you do start to really notice what makes these things important and what makes these things so satisfying,
Mhm.
so much of it, I've said a few times during this show, is right here.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and there's a wine for everybody too.
Yep.
yeah,
I think people who don't like wine yet, they just haven't had their aha
Yeah.
moment. You just got to keep getting them to try new things because
So
there's
many
something
grapes.
that'll
that'll click.
provide that spark for them.
Someone's growing a Charbono,
Yeah,
and you can get a
Right.
100% Charbono
right.
if you look for it from California.
Yeah, and that's kind of always been my number one philosophy in wine, which I got from my friend Gary Vaynerchuk, which is you have to try new things constantly.
Known for many things, but also a wine guy, by the way, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah. So because he always put it this way, like, how would you know that pizza is your favorite food if you never had pizza?
Right.
Right. So if you've never had a Petite Syrah, if you've never had a Madeira, if you've never had a Fiano, how do you know? You might love it.
Well, I always thought my least favorite wine was port. But
and that's the other thing.
I am in love.
Yeah, you're one, maybe you just haven't had the right one of those things. And,
Absolutely.
And your palate evolves over time too. Things that I loved 15 years ago, I don't drink as much of anymore.
Remember when blush wines weren't taken seriously? Like rosés? Oh, really? You're doing it? Everyone's doing a rosé now.
Yeah.
And it's become its own,
It's a giant market.
And
right?
It's huge. And it can be done well,
and,
turns out.
And you can have rosés that look almost crystal clear and then ones that are, almost darker than a Pinot, and just the whole gamut. And they make them from any grape, rosé of pure cab, someone turned that into a rosé. So, but I think the best of them are excellent.
Yeah, I think there's, a time and a place for every wine. And
you guys have a rosé too.
We've made one. Michael's not a big rosé fan.
I thought we got a rosé.
We've made one a couple of years. We did a Grenache Syrah rosé. We did a Grenache rosé. We did a Malbec rosé one year. This past year we did kind of a combination rosé / Beaujolais style Grenache, which may have been what I poured you last time you were here.
Yeah, I thought I remember, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we get a bottle of it?
It's a little bit darker. It's not like dark like the regular Grenache, but it's got a little bit more tint to it.
What?
Fresco, yeah. That's it.
Yeah, we did get a bottle of it then, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that was our kind of compromise on making a quote unquote rosé.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, some rosés are what they call intentional rosés, which is, the grapes are grown and harvested specifically because they're going to become rosé. And then there are what they call sauniers or bleeds, where the rosé is a byproduct of red wine production in order to concentrate the juice in your red wine so it has more exposure to the skins. You bleed some of that unfermented pink juice out of the tank. Some people can just pour it down the drain, or you can make it into rosé. you know?
I cannot believe how goddamn good this port is.
Oh,
this is so good.
Right, you're just savoring it.
Ah.
Yeah, I should have savored mine more.
Well, I can pour you a little more. Pete.
I'm breathing it in.
Just a little bit. Thank you very much. Yeah,
and now you get the true experience of the color here because you don't have any red in the glass.
Oh, that's wonderful. And by the way, to the listeners, if you've ever gone wine tasting in Napa, you do not know what the experience is about, and you get well taken care of here. I call them Napa pours.
No, you should say if you've only tasted in Napa. If you only tasted in Napa, you have no idea what this is. You don't know.
I mean, the Napa pours, it's like they...
there are a lot of people out there who say, I go wine tasting all the time. I come up Highway 29 and I pop by this place and that place. And I appreciate that you're having a great time. But I promise you, it's nothing like this.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is it's not quite our home yet, but, the experience we want to provide is that, you're in our home.
Yeah.
I could drink this with a caramel apple.
That's what I was saying. Like the apple pie, baby. Apple pie with ice cream, huh? Right?
Did you miss the
cheese? She likes the cheese idea.
Did you miss the pairing that I had in Fort Worth? Did you leave for a second, or did you hear the? Yeah. It was a Grand Marnier souffle with toasted hazelnuts and caramel sauce
and
honeycomb. That was the bomb pairing with this wine. Yeah,
man,
I'm gonna send that to every place I do a wine dinner from now on. So
here,
I don't care how hard it is. Make a souffle.
Find a honeycomb.
We've done a couple of wine dinners locally. We'd like to do more. We're talking to a couple of our friends.
We'll build you a table.
Doing them.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
You and I get together and build a 12-person table.
We've done them at A16 in San Francisco. We're good friends with the owner, Shelley, there. We'd like
A16.
to do
Wow,
more.
I haven't been there in a while.
Yeah, we haven't done any up here yet, but we're going to. We're working on it. Yeah, we're working on doing something with Mateo in town here, who's a good friend. Yeah. Did you ever go to Harvest Moon in Sonoma before it closed?
I don't know.
Michael's close with the couple that own that, and they have this new little place. They have a family now, so they didn't want to be in the restaurant every night of the week, so they have more of a kind of breakfast and lunch / bakery kind of spot now. But we're talking about doing some pop-up dinners with them.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
You know what might be pretty interesting, and I'm just spitballing, but if you had developed a partnership with small wineries that were close by, and then there was a tasting menu that took the better part of, the latter half of the day, where somebody would showcase one or two wines with one or two pairings, and then you'd go to another place for one or two wines and one or two pairings, and it would just be a showcase for it. It would be an experience, a total experience that somebody would organize.
Yep.
But it would span a few different wineries and a few different chefs. That would be pretty amazing.
Yeah,
that would be an amazing
quite a day. Yeah.
Get on that.
Yeah.
Make it happen. Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
that was fantastic.
Thank you again, Palmer, for pouring the wonderful nectar. And that's the great way
and
to
for
cap.
making the wonderful nectar,
Yes, and for making the wonderful
and for
nectar.
living by principles in your business that create this very special product. Because
thank you.
That's what we wanted to showcase was that you're here living a very particular dream that has everything to do with being the absolute best at a craft that is very, very finite.
Yep.
And labor intensive and cost intensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you talk about how it's you and Michael making the wine, I mean, that's two guys just getting dirty.
You're wrecking all the barrels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No hiring someone else to come in for just a couple of weeks and rack the barrels. Nope. Let's get out there and live this thing.
Yeah,
Bam.
we do bring in one extra set of hands for the harvest because it's a lot of work.
Okay. One extra set of hands.
Yeah.
Not a team.
Right.
One person.
Yeah.
So you're out there picking the grapes.
We do occasionally. We'll pick small lots in the vineyard on our own. All the work we do ourselves is in the winery. Generally, we have hire a picking crew in this vineyard,
and they do that for a living.
And all the other grapes that we buy from other vineyards what the price we pay includes the harvesting of the grapes.
And it's Kathleen and I have seen a couple documentaries, and it's a skill. It's not just come up to the grape and pick it.
Yeah.
I learned they've got knives and they have to decide which fruit to fall and which not, and sometimes actually make even snipping and clipping decisions. And it's it's not just go and take the grapes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the quality of your crew can mean a lot for the quality of the wine, especially in our winery where we don't have a sorting table with 8 people sorting the grapes before they go into the tank.
Yeah.
We basically whatever comes in from the vineyard
gets to the tank.
Gets into the tank. So
they themselves
so
have
we rely
experience.
on the crew to only pick the best stuff, and we're out there in the vineyard and making sure say, hey, pointing out clusters. Don't pick the ones that look like this.
Yeah.
And if one ends up in the bin, we're hanging out on the tractor, grabbing clusters
real time,
and throwing
like,
them
hey,
out.
not this one, guys.
Out. Yeah.
I want to tell our listeners, the funny thing was when we arrived here for our tasting the other day, we walked in and we had to go to the bathroom. Pete and I went to the bathroom and we walked by the bathroom and he pointed at the gear and went, that's the wine. That's where the wine's made. And we were able to see, and it's not like you're in a factory with great big vats of stuff and, industrial. The industrial revolution has not hit this process.
Yeah. Well, you have to come up in about
batch.
6 weeks. And once we have a full winery full of tanks and see what it looks like when we, when we're really rocking and rolling, that whole space is just filled with tanks, and we're doing punch downs kind of all day, every day. And
wow,
a lot of action, a lot of smells. That's my favorite thing about winemaking, coming in the morning and smelling the fermentations. It's it's really special. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, we got a great postscript here.
Yep.
And I think that this was an amazing visit. And, we'll punch up the website and we'll get it in there. But it's Emmit-Scorsone. And look them up. Come out to the Sonoma Valley. Have this experience, everybody.
Yep. You won't be disappointed.
You will not be disappointed.
Right on.